If you want to build a mobile app with any significant amount of data processing, storage, or business logic, you need to make sure it has a robust backend. So in this video, I'll be taking you through a tour of my firm and robust backend. I'm sorry, I'm a child. Alright, so when you're designing your backend architecture, you need to take into account your situation and your needs. My situation is that I haven't ever developed an app before, so this project is mainly a learning exercise. I have some SQL relational database experience, and I don't have a lot of time because I'm doing this in my own time outside of work. So what do I need? I need to get up and running quickly. I want a relational database, not a NoSQL one, because again, that's what I'm more familiar with and it suits my data structures better. I need easy integration with React Native, authentication. I want it to be free to at least get started. Scalability isn't too much of a concern at this point because, like I said, it's kind of a learning exercise, but seeing as I've committed to releasing the app, having that scalability down the line is something that I'll probably want. And lastly, plenty of support and documentation to help me along the way if I get stuck with any issues. So bearing this in mind, you've got a couple of options on how you approach creating your backend for your application. You could do it manually, or you can use a backend as a service. Both come with their own pros and cons. Doing it manually, you get far more control over your backend, over your API routing and your database configuration. But on the flip side, obviously you'll be responsible for building, maintaining and scaling all of that stuff. A manual backend configuration that's commonly used for React Native apps is the MERN stack. So MERN stands for MongoDB, Express, React, and Node. This is like a really high level diagram of how the MERN stack is put together. So you've got your front end, which is React, or in my case, React Native. And then the backend server is made up of Express and Node API, and the database is a MongoDB. So the front end makes requests to the backend that then retrieves data from the database and then feeds it back into the front end. Based on my situation, I've chose to use a backend as a service because it basically takes care of this entire section for you. And I want to avoid having to build and maintain all of the infrastructure related if possible. One of my main priorities is to get up and running quickly. I'm more focused on the product and getting out there. So if I can avoid having to create and maintain all of that infrastructure myself, that's what I want to do. And also backends as systems usually come with additional features like authentication, security, and push notifications and things like that, which again would add time and effort to implement myself. The service that I chose to use is Supabase, and Supabase, as it says there, is an open source Firebase alternative. I did have a look at Firebase, but basically I decided against it because it uses a NoSQL database, and as I mentioned, I wanted a relational one. And Supabase uses Postgres, which is perfect for me. And it ticks all of the boxes and the criteria that I mentioned earlier. So if we have a look in one of my projects, you can see you've got the four main pillars of the service here. You've got your database, authentication, your storage for images and videos, and real-time requests, which basically allow you to monitor your database and provide real-time updates and notifications without having to poll the database constantly. I figure I'll just take a quick walk through Supabase front end and some of the features that I've used so far, just bearing in mind it's a work in progress, and yeah, I don't know, I'm not an expert. Alright, one of the main components of a backend system is your database. And if we click into the database panel here, we can see we've got a schema visualizer, a schema visualizer, which just shows you all of your tables that you've got in your database and the relationships between them. Confession time, I actually didn't spend too long designing my database up front, and the reason for that is because I thought it'd be a pretty straightforward database, quite small scale. I thought I'd have my venues, my artists, my events, and user profiles, and then a records table to show which events which users have been to. And I thought that if it needs to become any more complex or anything needs to be added, I'll just do that as I progress along the way. And that is what I'm doing at the moment. Probably not the best method, and I would say if you have anything even slightly more complex than this project, do a bit more planning and preparation up front. But here we are. Speaking of tables, you can, within Supabase, you can edit and manage them either using this nice fancy GUI editor, which is pretty cool, or you can use the SQL editor if you want to write actual SQL queries. I tend to jump between using those depending on what the situation is and what I need to do. But yeah, both quite useful. So if we go back to the database panel, take a look at functions. I've got two functions here. The first one's pretty self-explanatory, get all events. It gets all the events that I've got in my database, and get selected events, that gets all of the events that are selected by the logged in user. And excuse me, having these as functions allows me to call them easily from my front end when I need to. Now, I won't go through too many of the tools here in detail, mainly because I haven't used them yet, but there's plenty of good stuff there. You've got your triggers, which allow you to trigger functions being called based on changes to your database. You've got lots of extensions that you can install to increase functionality. You've got your indexes to improve database performance, your roles and responsibilities for access control to the database, and all that good stuff like backups and migrations and everything, which I'm sure I'll need to get around to in the future, but I'm not quite there yet. So in terms of authentication, if we click in here, we can see some of the test accounts I've created while I've been developing. If we go into policies, this is where you can set the row level security, which basically allows you to set individual policies that determine the level of read and write access to your tables. Providers, taking a look at providers now, this I think is pretty cool. It's one of the nice benefits of having a backend as a system because it's already built in. I feel it's one of those features of functionality that would be a bit of a pain, or at least some extra work to implement yourself if you're using like external libraries or something like that, but it's nice that it's in here already. And what it does is it provides methods for your users to be able to log into your application. So at the moment I've only got email enabled, so you can only sign up with email and password, but I'll definitely be adding some social logins as I progress. I mean, yeah, I'll definitely be adding like Google, Twitter, Facebook, and things like that. I mean, if we have a quick look, Supabase tries to make it as easy as possible to set these things up. You kind of tick enable sign in with Google there, and the documents will walk you through the setup process. You basically set up your client IDs on the Google side, add them in here for whatever platform you're using, whether it's iOS or Android or both, and then create your components and business and create your components and logic in your React Native front end, and then Supabase kind of does the hard work beneath the bonnet. Rate limits. So yeah, again, you can set rate limits here basically to stop people abusing your system. So stop them making your system send out 1 million emails or SMS messages. Email templates. So templates to send out when users sign up or they reset the password, stuff you'd expect as an end user to get. It's all kind of here in one place, which is really nice. And yeah, I haven't touched URL configuration or hooks yet, so I won't cover those. And then yeah, you've got your storage, edge functions, real time, like I mentioned earlier, for real time notifications. At this stage, what's on my to-do list for the back end coming up? Well, for now, I need to fix the relationships between some of the new tables I've recently created and normalize all of the data. I then need to set up properly the row level security and role-based access for all of my tables, which will be done by the time you watch this video, so please don't try and hack me. I need to figure out how to regularly run the scripts that I've got that populate all of my tables with data, because at the moment they're just run locally on my machine. Later on, I need to set up storage for when I implement media upload functionality. I need to look at real-time functionality for notifications, like when one of your friends says they're going to go to an event, and I need to add those additional login methods that I mentioned earlier. And very later on, I'll need to start looking at like planning backups and migrations and things like that. But that's all I can think of now off the top of my head. I'm sure more will come up as I go along the development of the app. So, very quick whistle-stop tour of Supabase, how I've used it so far. Like I said, it's a work in progress. I've kind of stopped halfway through arbitrarily to start doing these videos and catch up to where I am. So there definitely will be more of this as I progress and need to use more features. I guess that's all for now. So yeah, thanks for watching. If you have, hope you had a nice time. If not, sorry. See ya.